Hi, Sally Hurst here, and welcome to number 3 of Monotype Mayhem. And if you saw the state of the room and I'm surrounded by prints, mayhem is the operative word for this week's session. I've seen photos online of some of your messes too, so we're all having a grand time. Filthy hands as usual. Before I go into what we're going to do today, there's a few questions from last week. So somebody asked, what's the benefit of a soft roller over a hard roller for monoprinting? And really, a soft roller will leave more paint behind, really. So you've got more to play around with on your jelly. If you're buying fresh, you're starting afresh, then soft rollers are probably better. So the Speedball one's very nice. I've put a link on my website for a nice soft roller that you can buy in the UK from handprinted.co.uk. But if you've got hard rollers, because that's what you have, then fine, you're good to go. If you're only using a rolling pin, it works, okay? So I'm aware that a lot of you are playing around with what you have, and that's fabulous. Somebody also said, why not just add plain retarder or airbrush medium to a paint? And the reason why I did the demo last week was I was trying to keep the consistency. I used the heavy body gel with the retarder to mimic the consistency of the golden open. Okay, if you just used retarder on its own or airbrush medium on its own, they're very runny and they would make your paint quite runny, but there's no reason at all why you can't experiment with those. If you have either of those, a retarder or an airbrush medium, certainly play around with them. Your paint is going to be looser, but it will be slower drying. Okay, so that was the answer to that one. Someone also suggested, why not work on a piece of glass? Yes, fine. So in terms of your surface and what your jelly goes on, you could work on a piece of glass. It could be on a piece of laminate, no problem at all. One of the benefits, which I haven't got into, there's way too much to cover, is if you're working on something see-through like glass or a piece of laminate or perspex, you could put a photograph underneath, and that could be a starting off point, a reference point for your design. Because as well as doing all this bonkers stuff that we're doing this week, you can use your jelly traditionally. You can do landscapes, you can do still life, you can do portraits. It's really up to you what you make of the skills that I'm giving you. But neither this nor the cold wax medium means you have to work abstractly. It just seems to be easier, and someone commented on that they're finding it easier to be more abstract with the jelly printing. And I think that's because your focus is on shapes, lines and colours. Okay, as opposed to representational stuff. That's really the only difference. So take from it what you need, really. Phil, thank you very much, Phil, reminded me that if you have dried paint on a plate, rather than wash it off, if you give it a coat of a white, for example, either that's a heavy body or white gesso, and then you put it down, you'll find that the new fresh layer of paint will kind of wake up the old layer, and it'll enable you to transfer it. You don't get a perfect print, but you get some nice grungy textures. Okay, so experiment with those kind of ideas. If I get time, I will add another video into that one. So what I've done today, really, I've spent the last 3 hours working in this space, making all sorts of prints, using all sorts of tools. It isn't all going to fit into the 45 minutes. So I'm going to stitch this. I've filmed it all separately. I'm learning, and I'm going to stitch these together. But there's probably going to be a second video with all the rest of it. Okay, so there'll be a couple of videos for this week's, but I won't schedule that one. That'll just be way up on YouTube, and you'll get it. So if you watch this one first, then you'll get the second one more, because you'll have seen where the tools come from. So this one I'm talking about making tools, making those funky roller foam things, and different surfaces, and how to use stencils, how to make stencils. I think that's pretty much it. And then I go into a whole bunch of making prints using all those tools and stencils. Okay, and that is what is stretching the time out. So I'll be putting some of it. No way I'm going to get it all into this one. So we'll just see how we go. Enjoy. Off you go. Okay, I touched on a little bit of this last session. And this is all about making things that are going to lift the paint off the plate. and where they lift, you're obviously going to get some kind of texture going on. So it's fairly straightforward and it's really simple. The simplest one that you might find you have around obviously is cardboard. So if you cut into, this is the corrugated cardboard, if I cut into this, again, nice sharp knife, taking care, and you peel it away, you might have to play around with it just to get off the bits that you don't particularly want. You get the texture of the corrugation, okay? You get this ridge going on. That's particularly nice. I really like working with that. I'm working with these obviously to fit the jelly, but you don't have to. They could be shapes that you cut out, don't have to be square. This is the funky foam stuff. This is that sticky back foam. It comes in about a pack of 10 and it's super sticky. And it's particularly nice because it's foam and it's absorbent. It really takes up quite a lot of paint. But equally, because it's foam absorbent, you can then retransfer that paint. And when I get to the printing stage, I'll show you, because it acts as a stamp. Okay, so you have paint in it that you lift off the plate, but then that paint can go down onto another piece of paper. This is just a mount card. Doesn't really matter what card you use. It could be this kind of card. Basically, all the card is doing is lifting the foam away from the surface. And I've done a kind of positive, negative thing. So the shape I cut out here, I've stuck on this one. I've done some in each corner for a reason. If I hadn't done some in this corner, when you lay it down, you end up getting a lot of paint there on the card that you might not necessarily want. Okay, so by making sure there's something in all the areas, then that's great. Okay, so those you're going to have a go at. Equally, you can attach your foam to things. So these are some corks. These are some corks used for wine making. Okay, I was looking for the biggest corks I could find. They come even bigger than that. You can use that. All right, that in its own is going to create a circle. It's going to soak up a little bit of the paint. You're going to get a texture of the foam, of the cork. But equally, you could put a shape on it. Anything. I'm just doing random stuff here. Sometimes the not thinking is the best thing. Okay, and so that can go on the jelly, but equally that makes a stamp. It can go onto another piece of paper. These have caused quite a stir. I did order a new one, but it hasn't arrived yet. So I've taken all the old foam off this one. It comes off super easy with the odorless mineral spirits. I use the Bob Ross one. You just put some in a tray and soak it up, and within a couple of minutes, the odorless mineral spirits just dissolves the glue. Picking it off with your fingers is really tricky. So it's still a little bit sticky where there was some foam, but I'm not worrying about that. I quite like the pattern on there. These are for pizzas. I have no idea. Actually, I need to Google it because I'm intrigued now. And the idea is you could cut some interesting shapes and strips. I'm going to go around this way. I'm not going to complete all of this now. I'll do it in a bit. It could be dots, it could be stripes, it could be shapes, it could be anything. What, dots and dashes are quite nice. And basically you just offer it up. Keep peeling the back away as you turn it. And then when it meets its end, just snip it off. And you're good to go. Okay, so I'll continue all the way through there and all the way through here, and I'll show you how that works when we get onto the printing stage. Finally, this is a wallpaper seam roller. The idea being, not obviously when it's not hasn't got rubber bands on it, the idea being you're putting a wallpaper on your wall and you want a nice flat seam, and you can roll that along and it's good to go. Now the joy of this, because it doesn't have two ends like this one, I've been able to wrap it with some rubber bands. Okay, I have no idea what this is going to do. I didn't have any rubber bands to fit, so I've kind of had to twist and double up. So obviously those twists are going to do something. I could equally have used the foam on here, no problem at all. And these are cheap, and they're nice, good hard plastic. As I said last week, you can't do it. I've tried doing it with old ones of these, ones that I've got paint on, etc. And it really doesn't like it. For some reason, it doesn't like the rubber, the sticky foam. It just ends up peeling off. So you need to buy some, okay? But then you're good to go, right? So plenty of things to play around with. Okay, this bit is really just about other things you might find. String is really nice to use because you can lay that down on your jelly and put your paper on, and it's going to leave a negative line, which is delicious. So it's almost like a drawn line. So that's really nice. And different types of string are going to give you, this is a piece of that Hessian. You'll see it, put it on there. It's a nice kind of hairy string. Different types of string are going to give you different textures. You can go for very thick string or woolen thread or embroidery thread. Personally, I find if it's too thick, it's too high, you end up with a halo, but sometimes that's nice too, okay? Honestly, we're just touching the surface of this. Glue guns, all sorts. Once you start to think about it and Googling around, you'll find mountains of stuff. So strings are nice. Rubber bands I quite like. Because you can either, if you cut them, you can lay them down flat, you can lay them down in circles. Okay, they're quite happy to sit on the jelly and mask your paper. This was just a packet I found that some mushrooms came in, and I was just thinking, I wonder what would happen if, obviously you don't want anything too sharp, but that's quite nice. No idea what's going to do. Finally, I mentioned polystyrene. Now this is a particular polystyrene that you can buy in craft shops, hobby shops, that is specifically designed for printmaking. But the polystyrene you get with the round circular plates, or polystyrene that you get from a pizza, which actually has a nice texture to it, just see what you have. It's best to use something with a fine grain, for want of a better word. This is some polystyrene I have from some packing, which is going to give a nice texture, but it doesn't do what this does. What this will do is if I draw into that, I'm pushing down the polystyrene. Okay, and what will happen is the polystyrene will lift the paint, but it will leave this line. And you can spend hours, and it's one way of getting some really nice architectural stuff going. It's very satisfying. You can cut holes in this. Again, it's quite brittle, but it's cheap. So none of it's, this is all stuff that shouldn't cost too much. I could, if I could find my knife, I could even cut. Here it is. I'm going to cut away into this. Really easy to cut. And if I very gently score, be interesting to see what a different blade does when I come to print with that. Okay, so this is printing polystyrene. Okay, we really can't look at anything to do with printmaking and jelly printing without looking at stencils. There's plenty on the market. If anything, there's probably too many to choose from. You can either buy them or you can make your own. These are two from a company called stencilgirl.com, run by my friend Mary Beth Shaw. The one thing I like about the stencils that she produces is she has artists design them for her, so you get some really funky ones going on. My preference is always for these kind of grid patterns, but that's a personal thing. So they come in a range of patterns and designs. When you're buying stencils, try always to think in the back of your mind how you're going to make it your own, how you're going to use it, so it's not just the same old repetition thing. But stencils really have a good use. So they're the stencilgirl.com ones. I make my own a lot. I like making them. So I have a machine called a Brother Scan and Cut. You can Google that or ask me about it, where basically you send it your design and it chops it out of this plastic. And this plastic is quite cheap. The plastic that these are made out of is a beautiful plastic called Mylar, but it's quite expensive to buy. This is a cheap plastic, and I've got a sheet somewhere. Here we go. Under here. This is the kind of plastic that you use for covering a folder. Okay, it's not acetate, it's thicker than acetate. I buy that on Amazon. I'll put a link on. It's quite a brittle plastic, but the machine copes with it beautifully. So this is one I've used a lot, and I tend not to bother washing them. I quite like when they get this patina, and sometimes these end up embedded in my acrylic paintings. I wouldn't embed them in an oil and coal wax painting. They need a little bit more glue than that, but they're great embedded in acrylic paintings. And this is just one, same plastic that I haven't really used much. I wasn't overly keen on that one. So you can make your own mechanically as they are made, but also it's quite nice to cut your own. And there's loads of YouTube videos on how to cut stencils so that your whole design doesn't fall out. So you can use this stuff, but I find cutting this stuff by hand, it's really brittle, and it's not a pleasant experience. So I tend not to use that to cut by hand. You could obviously always just use paper. You could use newsprint. You can use anything, but they're not going to last very long unless you coat them with the polymer, but I'll go into that later. So I was using this stuff. This stuff goes back years. You can still buy this. It's called stencil card, but it's really thick. So it's great for when I'm painting, and it's really nice to cut. But it's not so great for the jelly because it has this thickness to it, which means if you put it down and put your paper on top, you get a halo around the edges. We're wanting our stencil to lie as flat on the jelly plate as possible, and this thick stuff doesn't do it. So therefore, what are our alternatives? Yes, you can buy Mylar by the sheet, of course you can, that Mary Beth uses for her stencils, but I'm always on the lookout for cheap. This is really nice. This is, again, it's a plastic. This is a plastic that you get if you buy artist portfolios and you have those big sleeves to put your work in. It's a soft plastic and it's really nice to cut. Okay, so I'll just show you what I mean by how nice it is compared to the other. Nice sharp knife, remember, and a cutting mat. It really cuts easily and it's not brittle. So it's nice, okay? So that's great to cut, and again, it's nice and thin. So anything you can find lying around like that is really good. I was researching this and to work out what it is, and actually it's card that's soaked in linseed oil, which a while ago gave me the idea what happens if I coated a piece of paper, a thinner piece of paper, in oil. So this is a piece of paper. This piece of paper I have soaked in oil, just olive oil out of the kitchen. You basically brush it all on, you let it soak in, you wipe off all the excess, and then kind of leave it for a couple of days so it's no longer leaking any oil. But whereas if I cut into this and I use that's, yes, obviously if it soaks up the paint, you're creating a sealed surface. But this actually makes it's kind of like a homemade Mylar. And it cuts beautifully. And again, it's just the paper we're using. It's that 140 gram drawing paper. Tidy that up a bit. And it really cuts nicely, okay? So this would be a stencil, but don't throw these guys away because these are our masks, okay? So stencils, masks. I hope that helps. Okay, as I'm going to be working on a range of different papers and surfaces. So I thought it'd be an opportunity now just to show you what I'm planning to do today, so that when we get started, then there's no question mark on that. Most of the prints I've shown you so far, we did the first session, we were printing on a 6-inch jelly and you get the shape of the plate. You don't have to do that. So you can buy round jelly plates, obviously, but you can actually use stencils to create the shape that's going to appear on your paper. So this is a piece of that plastic stencil stuff that I use. Equally, it could be this stuff in a completely different shape. I've just cut a nice, neat circle on this one, but it doesn't have to be a nice, neat circle. And what I've done, this is another one that I've taped down to a piece of paper. So I know that when I print, the paint is only ever going to hit there. It's not going to go anywhere else. So when I can print as often as I like, as many layers as I want, I can go into it with pens if I want to, etc., etc. And up until the point I take the tape off, this paper is is printable, paintable. Okay, once I take the paper off, the tape off, I've got a nice clean white border. This one I've signed off. So it's a nice way of getting an alternative shape. But as I said, it doesn't have to be a round shape. We could use any kind of shape you like. But also what it means is if I have a larger sheet of paper, you're not restricted. I'll show you what I mean by that when we get there. Other ways of working and using masking off. So I could just, if I wanted a nice clean border, as opposed to the curved edge jelly plate shape, I could mask off. So this piece of paper, I've masked off about 1/2 centimetre in all the way around to the size of the jelly with masking tape. Now the tape I'm using is a Frog low tack delicate surface masking tape, which means that it's going to come away, here we are, it's going to come away from the paper without ripping the paper. Okay, so you have to experiment with what you have. Make sure it's low tack. If you haven't got any, you can use any masking tape, and you could just de-tack this by rubbing it against your pinafore or your jeans, just to get some of the stickiness off, okay, and see whether that works. So that's what I've done with this one. All right, so it's going to end up with, no matter what I do to this, I'm going to end up with a nice white square. I often do that with a large sheet of paper as a grid, and I'm probably going to do that as a separate video to show you what that does. So you end up with lots of little prints with white borders. I also do the same with my oil and coal wax painting. This is a piece of that dressmaking tissue with a nice text on it that I've simply cut to the size of the inside of that, and I've glued that on. I've glued that on with some 3M spray glue. I haven't used, I could have used polymer medium, matte medium, anything, just I happen to have the spray glue and I quite like how it goes down nice and flat. This one, again, I've boarded it off, but what I've put on here, I'm not sure if you can see the brush strokes on there, this is white gesso, which, because it's got brush strokes, straight away I'm going to start off with a grungier surface, and straight away it's more absorbent. So that's going to be a different texture, and this one is black gesso. These are all the papers. I showed you some of these right back in the first lesson. Now I've cut these all to size. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you what I'm going to do this week. I've cut these all to size. This is to make my Japanese stab bound book. I made the Lotus book and put a video of that online yesterday. So these are all cut to size. So I've got some matte paper. I've got some like dressmaker paper. I've got some plain paper. I've got book paper. I've got the Carnival wet strength tissue. I've got my Abaca tissue. I won't necessarily print on all of these. Some of these I'll use to interleave. Some of them I might even cut some nice holes out so you can see through. The thing about artist books is it's unlike any book you could buy in a shop. It's made by an artist, and it becomes like a piece of sculpture. That's the Abaca tissue. Now, these are not A4. This is A4. This is smaller than A4 because, and the only reason for that is I was restricted by the size of this paper. This is a piece of a vintage book that had fallen apart, and that was the size. That's how wide it was. So I've cut all my other papers to that size. Okay, so I think we're pretty much good to go. The paints I'm using on this section are Quinacridone Nickel Gold, Indian Yellow, Van Dyke Brown, Sennelier Yellow Ochre, and Carbon Black. I haven't planned this. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but let's go straight in. I'm going to go in with the Indian Yellow. I'm going to try and use those rollers on this one and the foam. So let's make this one all about foam. Let's see what we can do with it. There's nothing to stop you, and I should have said that actually, it doesn't stop you mixing two colours on a palette, on a plate. So you can get what we call a blend. I'll show you what I mean. There we go. Obviously for that you don't want to go in every direction. That's nice, like that. Right, okay, let's go with this guy. I'm going to lay him down. Push that down. Lift that off. And then in with a piece of paper. Okay, like that. That's what foam does. Equally, there's paint on here. You can't see on the screen, just trust me. Okay, what was left behind. That's really nice. And we're going again, recharge this. A little bit of string floating about. And do the other one. So this is about lifting the paint as opposed to masking it. So we're lifting it off the surface. Okay. So we're not cutting the white paper because this is obviously it's lifting, but it's leaving traces behind. So where it's lifted, you've probably got about 50% of the paint, and then the rest of it is what's gone down. I'm going to go in. Let's be bold. Going with the black. I'm not going to bother cleaning my roller because the black will just mix it all together. Okay, what happens if, here we go. Again, so this bit's all about the foam. So I'm going to go like that. And I'm going to turn it over. And go like that. I'm going to go on top of one of these guys. Let's see what we get. Okay, getting some really nice, probably a bit too dark, but getting some really nice grungy stuff going on. There's still quite a lot of paint left on there, but actually what I'm going to do, says she. Let's have to do it on here. I've got, there's paint on here, okay. Remember what I said about it being foam? It's soaking up the paint. So it acts as a stamp. Yeah? There's still quite a lot of paint on there. I'm going to go in. I've got a really nice grungy thing going on with that one. I'm just going to keep ploughing on. And the knowledge that at any point, don't forget I've got these too, these ghosty ones. At any point I can, you can stop this video and rewind it to see what I've done. That's going to go with the flow. Let's see how much printing I can get done while I'm busy today. And then anything that is too much for the session, I'll just put a separate videos up on YouTube. I'm going to carry on with the black, but I'm going to do it as a blend. Which means I'm going to just clean off part of my roller. There we go. Still probably get too much black, but I quite like those splodges of, I'm going to wipe it away actually. liking those splodges of nickel gold. Let's go in here with another roller. So you can, you know, we haven't really touched on all the things that we can do with the paint on here. Blending it, masking it, different effects, painting it really before you start going into anything else. I'm going to go in with my seam roller onto this. So what I've got down here, just to recap, I've got some Indian yellow here, I've got some black down the middle and some nickel ozo gold. I'm just going to take some off. I'm liking this. If I go back onto, as I said, go back onto a piece of paper. This is where you need a bigger space. I don't know if you can see what's going to happen there. Because remember, rubber bands are, you know, it's rubber, so it's the same stuff that's on a roller. Okay, so you can use that. I'm going to take some more off down this side. I'm going to get my foam guy and I'm going to go in there. Okay, and again, that has paint on it. So let's see what that does. Okay, so the foam acts as a stamp. I'll go again. And I'm going to go into that orangey bit. Okay, so you can see how we're building up shapes, lines and colours. And this is just with the foam. So we've had the foam roller, we've had the rubber band roller, the foam squares. Oh, liking what's happening in there. Okay, and again, let's get a ghost. Let's go. Actually, I'm going to choose a bit of my other paper. Let's go for this. Again, this is a bit smaller than the A4, but that's for a reason. I've cut it to size for a particular project. I've got some nice, that's the ghost that's happening on that one. So that was the rubber band. This guy I could have played for hours, but I'm going to see how much I can get done with all the other tools. The foam guy, the rubber band, this, and I've lost it, this one, okay, with those colours. Okay, in this one I'm going to use the Indian yellow and yellow ochre, which is a transparent against an opaque, so you're going to get an interesting blend on that. And I'm going to go with the card, the polystyrene, and some of these fabrics to see what different textures I get. Let's clean the roller. Now I'm whizzing through these. You know, you could take longer, but you've only got as long as your paint will enable you to play. I think I might have overmixed that together, but that's okay. I'm going to go in with this. Let's see what we get. Again, this is about lifting. I'm pushing quite hard. I lifted it off and I can see what's happening here. A clean piece of paper. Okay, still got a bit of black on that roller. Which way around? Here we go. There. So you can see where the stripes, the corrugated card, and then obviously this is the smooth card. Doesn't really give much texture at all. This won't transfer in the same way as the foam does, so I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is get the ghost from here before it dries too much. Now I'm going to stick with this palette for this session. Just to let you know what I've got. I've got an Indian yellow hue, yellow ochre, a crimson, a black, I've got the bronze, which I like, I'll show in a minute, and the Van Dyke brown, because I'm going to do a lot of these pages. Oh, and the Ozo gold. I'm going to do a lot of these pages for this Japanese stab bound book that I want to make. So even though the papers are all different and all the stencils are different and everything's different, the colours will be the same throughout the book, which is going to give it some unity. But you don't have to, okay? These are just the colours I'm choosing. So that's my ghost print from the card. Okay, so it's always a lighter print. Actually, I've mentioned the bronze, so I'm going to go in with that. This is a particular favourite colour of mine. And it's not something I would normally choose. I'm not a girl for lots of bling, but there's something particularly nice about this colour. Just going to get the yellow off there. There we go. And it's I think it's the only, I've not seen another one that does quite what this does. Okay, so bear with me, we'll watch this. Okay, let's roll that out. This is Golden's Iridescent Bronze in the open. And I'm going to oh, I think I'll use this. Let's see what happens with this. Okay, this is that foam thing, remember, with the stripes on. And again, it's lifting. That's even pressure. If you're using something like this and you've got gaps in it, there's nothing to stop you just putting a piece of paper on top, just so that you're not going to get sticky. Particularly if you're using those thin tissues, I will lay those down, but put another piece of paper on top. Otherwise, your hands are going to get covered in stuff. I'll lift that off. And I'm going to go in with a piece of paper. Okay, now I'm not sure if you can see what's happened here. It's green, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I thought that was bronze. It's a particular science of this paint. It's made of phthalo green, and it's made from very finely coated mica flakes. And the mica flakes, which is the bronze, the mica flakes are heavier, so it disperses. Some of you who do watercolour will know about certain paints made by Daniel Smith that do a similar thing, and it's about the weight of the pigment. But look at that, that's fabulous. So what's happened in terms of our design is where I pushed into it, nothing has touched that paint, so the paint is as it was when I rolled it. Where I've pulled it off with the polystyrene, it's dispersed. Okay, so I've got some interesting things going on there. All right, but I'll take some more photos of that. But it's a particularly nice paint. I should have done a I'll do another one. I should have done the ghost. I'm just going to go for something else. I'm going to go for this. Okay. Now again, as I said before, if I put my hand on there, I'm going to end up really mucky. So I'm just going to have a piece of scrap paper just to hold it down. Because that was actually what I... No, yeah, actually, no. Here we go. Show you mine all the time. I'm going to put that down there. And because it's kind of a bit loose, I've got a clean roller that I'm going to push, because my hand isn't flat enough to really get what's going on in there. Okay, so again, that's dispersed. You've got there's the phthalo green and the bronze mixing together. There's a really nice ghost going to come out of this one. Yeah, okay, even greener. So there's nice backgrounds. I could go on and do all of these, but actually I'm going to move on to something else because I'm conscious of time. But I will do some more and put them on the video. I'm not going to bother cleaning that. Yeah, I think actually we'll stop there. Okay, in this bit I'm going to demonstrate some of the stencils, the bought ones and the ones I've made. Okay, so this is one of Mary Beth's stencils. I'm going to do this one on, let's go for this circle. Okay, I need to mark off where it's going to go because this paper is bigger. So I want to make sure the paper goes down the same place each time. So that note, I always put a little tick in the top here, and I'm going to line it up. Just going to drop it down there. It doesn't really have to go down the same place each time. It's just it's a bit easier to see roughly where it's going. Okay. So it will make sense when we take the stuff off. So that's a blend of yellow ochre and nickel azo gold. So that's the stencil. This is going to be the ghost. And let's go on, while we're on a grungy mode, let's go on the one that's the white gesso. Okay. Now at any point I could have gone in to this. You know, it's endless. So I could have gone in with the tools that I showed you in the first session. All of these guys, okay, so, and the rollers, all of this is intermixable. So just work out what you like. What I'm getting nice here is, you can't see it, but I do a close-up photo. I can see the gesso, the brush strokes of the gesso is giving me a really nice grungy texture. But I've still got stuff on there. I don't want to waste it. So I'm going to go on with this one. Oh, that's something nice. Liking that. Okay. The phthalo green that's coming through from the bronze is giving a nice contrast with the oranges. Now I'm going to roll it out and go in with. I need some more paint on there. I'm going to put some. Some yellow ochre on this side. Here we go. It really doesn't matter if it all begins to mix together, as long as you're keeping with a similar palette, as in I'm using predominantly yellows and oranges here. It doesn't really matter because they're going to blend together. If I'd gone in here now with some blue, I'd end up with a brown. I was going to end up in mud. So your colour theory needs to come into play at some point. My stencils, here we go. Let's go for this guy. So this is one of the ones from my oiled paper. I'm just going to drop it down like that. And what I'm going to do is take a larger sheet of paper. Yeah? So I'm going to start thinking, because I don't have a square, there's no square here. All that's going to print is these shapes. So I'm going to go here. This is a slightly thicker paper. This is a 220 gram. Doesn't really matter for what we're doing. It just happens to be what I had, but it's the same make. This is made by Sea White. Okay. So basically, this could be the starting point. I could keep going over here with lots and lots of shapes. So even though we're working on us with a 6-inch plate, doesn't mean your prints have to be 6 inches square. Okay, I'm liking that. That's quite nice. Put that to one side. I'm running out of room, seriously, in here. However, there's probably a bit of a ghost happening there. It's worth grabbing, for sure. On a clean bit. Or two. Let's go in again. So that was the homemade stencil with the oiled paper. It's just lovely. I can't tell you what a delight that was to realise I could do that. It's way cheaper than buying anything like Mylar. It's lovely to cut. It's just a piece of paper with olive oil on. Really isn't a problem at all. But the olive oil obviously is rejecting the paint, and it seems to soak in and give the paper some strength. I don't know how that works. Okay, I'm liking this colour combination. We're going good. What haven't I done? Here we go. This is the plastic. Again, I've just cut a big shape out of this plastic, so I'm going to go like that. All right. So I'm masking off now, right? It's a stencil that I'm using to mask. So all that's going to go onto the paper is that sweepy curve. And again, I could go back to my large piece, or I could just go for this one. Okay, that's there. Tear that off. You have to be careful with these, they're really wet, so you need to lay them down wet side up. There's stuff going on there, but I can see straight away that I'm not over inspired by it. So what I'm going to do is lay this down. This is the bit I cut out, and I'm going to lay that down there. Okay, so positive and negative. That piece of plastic was cut out of there. Okay. Wow, again. Plenty of stuff there, lots of things to think about. I'm going to take photographs of all the prints I've made. Bearing in mind, most of them have only got one layer on. I will be going back into this in my own time because I want to add more layers, but I wanted you to see what you get with those tools and those stencils, etc, etc. So I'll take a load of photographs and I'll whack them all on the website so you can get to see those. We've covered an awful lot and there's still more we could do, but we're kind of running out of time. So on the next session, which is the last session, I'm going to show you how to use traditional printing inks. So I know aware that some of you are printmakers and have oil-based inks. Now I haven't launched into this since the beginning because they take an age to dry. And they don't really work in terms of building the layers in quite the same way, and I didn't want to confuse you guys who are using acrylics, okay? But you can use traditional printing inks, and there's a couple of brands that I like, so we're going to show you that and how that works if that's what you're into. I'm also going to show you some approaches towards collage and how you can use these prints that you have for collage. I'm also going to show you, I'm going to finish off the working larger one, okay, so how to work on a larger piece of paper, and also introduce, if you haven't seen already, the 2 book formats that I've been talking about. Okay, so the one that's the lotus fold, there's 2 videos up online about those and the instructions. Basically what you need for that is 5 or 7, and odd numbers are often better, double-sided prints. Okay, so the small prints, but you print both sides of the paper, and some tissue paper that's printed and some other bits and pieces. For the Japanese stab bound, you basically just need to collate a whole bunch of prints together, and it's a really nice way of, I'll be doing it today as a record of what we've done over the last couple of weeks, so it makes a nice book. Bit like a scrapbook. So you collate them together and there's a way of neatly stitching them and making it into a nice thing. Okay, so that's a Japanese stab bound book. There will be the videos for both of those and how to do them and all the kit you need, separate videos up on the website. Okay, so and then of course don't forget to ask me any questions for our last session on Friday. Good. Okay, stay safe. The weather's changed a bit here in the UK. It's got a little bit colder, but that's okay. So wherever you are in the world, enjoy your printmaking. Keep emailing me questions. If you want to join the Facebook group, Sally Hurst Workshops, then do, because people are posting their work on there as well. But you don't have to get involved in Facebook at all. Instagram's quite nice, at Sally Hurst Artist. Okay, so either hashtag me or at Sally Hurst Artist if you're putting work on Instagram, and I'll see what you're doing. I'll see you next session. Bye bye.